You are listening to Mushing on First Paw Media. Visit our website at mushing.com.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Robert, and you're listening to the continued coverage of the 2025 Iditarod here on the Burled Arch. And tonight I am joined by my co-hosts, Roan Booser calling in from Talkeetna, Alaska, and Michelle Forto calling in from right next door here. Roan, how's it going tonight?
Going great. How are you doing?
We are doing well. Michelle, how's it going?
Sometimes I wonder if you even recognize that we are husband and wife. I am having a great evening. I'm wondering if I should just kick back and grab my snacks and let you guys roll.
Well, it is potentially possible. So we're going to jump right into this. A lot of stuff happening sort of here about 1/3 or so, almost halfway to the race. So at the time of recording, around 7 o'clock Alaska time, first place is Jesse Holmes, Nick Petit in second, Emily Ford in third, Paige Drobny in fourth, Matt Hall in fifth. And the interesting parts to that is some people have already done their 24s, so we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And then pulling up the rear is Mike Parker in last position. Quince Mountain follows, Jeff Dieter follows, Calvin Doherty follows that, and Bryce Mumford is the top or bottom five. And we do have one scratch, just was announced right before we went on air. Daniel Klein scratched because of Rule 42, and briefly, Rule 42 means a dog death on the trail. There's a whole process in order to do that. I know that they were supposed to talk a little bit about that in the off season, about whether they are immediately required to scratch or not. Maybe Roan knows a little bit about that. I'll ask in just a second. But he had a dog pass away just outside of Galena. And when that happens, there is a protocol that you have to follow. And then when you get there, you have to notify the race officials, of course, and then you are required to scratch. So that is what's happening with Daniel Klein. He was running a team out of Ryan Reddington's kennel. So that is that. We're going to talk a little bit about the trackers and some of the other stories that developed about that in just a bit, but we're going to let Roan jump in here. I know he was a busy guy and was not following Iditarod like he usually does. I shouldn't say should do, but I guess he was very busy today. So you're probably playing a little bit of catch up, but what do you know from us here on, I guess it's day 4 of the race?
Well, looks like the 24 leapfrogging is happening or started to happen and is continuing to happen. So that'll continue to be going on. Jesse will be getting off his 24 around midnight or 1 a.m. today or tomorrow, I guess. So once everybody kind of does the 24-hour shakeout, things become a little bit more obvious in terms of positions and who has the front lead or who's the front pack and who's maybe a few hours behind the pace of the front teams. So right now a couple teams in Caltag, and then the Paige Drobny, Matt Hall getting off their 24, going towards Caltag to catch up to those other guys. So that'll be interesting to see how they come off of that. I'm trying to catch up. I was at 5 this morning and have been running around till now, so trying to read the stories and read the tracker and see what's been happening. But yeah, looks like teams are cruising along pretty well on the Yukon River in a lot of the sections. As far as travel speeds go, I see a lot of 9s, 9.3, 9.5s on the tracker. So my assumption is the trail has improved a little bit since maybe some of the front teams went through, or just maybe it's just been good in general. It's hard sometimes to tell without being out there. But we're starting to see the teams kind of getting maybe closer together checkpoint wise in general. A lot of teams in checkpoints, few teams on the trail right now, but a lot of teams on their 24.
So let me talk to you a little bit about Mike Parker in the back position there. We were looking at the standings right before air, and it showed him taking about 45 hours to go from Tanana to Ruby. The person in front of him, Quince Mountain, took about 30 some hours, something like that. Can you explain that a little bit to our fans? I know we talked about some people will do it in 2 runs, some people will do it in 3. I guess the key statistic in Mike Parker is his average moving speed was only 2.2 miles an hour during that 100-mile stretch. So from a musher's perspective, what do you think about that?
So I doubt that was the actual speed that he was going without. I have not looked at the tracker, but so it's 117 miles between Tanana and Ruby. So in that average that you see on the standings, 2.55 miles an hour. That's 117 miles divided by 45 hours. Call it 40 hours. So that's including his rest stops. So he most likely stopped twice for a decent length of time. In both of his rests. Maybe he stopped 3 times. I can look at the tracker to see, but so once he left Tanana, once he signed out of Tanana, he's got 117 miles to go. You can either do that in one shot, which nobody has done or is attempted to do, probably because it's not a good idea in terms of that long of a run at that point in the race. And so people have rested twice, people have rested 3 times, or run it twice, run it in 3 runs. So that means that the average travel speed in the standings, that's assuming that they were trying to move while they were in fact resting the team. So if you look at his moving average on the tracker, it's showing 6.9 miles an hour. So if he's going 7 miles an hour, 117 miles divided by 7 hours, he's probably traveling for 16 or 17 hours of that 45 hours. So he's probably resting 28 hours. So he probably ran, did a 12-hour rest, did another run, did another 12-hour rest, did one more run, just kind of cruising along at 7 miles an hour, and that's how you get that 45-hour time. So a lot of time between checkpoints, but now my assumption would be that he's in Ruby taking his 24 and move down the trail after that.
Gotcha. Thanks for letting us know there. Michelle, you had something to add?
I think it's a good idea to talk a little bit about the weather on the river, and that might affect what you guys are thinking about the rest run times. It's looking like right now in Nulato, it's 21 degrees, but it's going to be a low of 9. Caltag is 24 with a low of 12. And what I looked at from tonight until Monday, those 2 areas are going to be in the single digits at night. And here's the kicker. On Sunday in Anvik, it's going to be warm, 30-degree high, 20-degree low, and snowing. They're going to have about 2 inches of snow in that area. So they're going to be coming up out of a cold dip into a warm zone again. I'm wondering how fast people are going to want to get up and get out of that area.
Well, we've already talked a lot about that in the last couple of days about running in the cooler temperatures. And of course, there's all sorts of ways to talk about weather and what's too warm and what's too, what's too hot. There's not any real too hot there, even at 30 with that. But they haven't had a whole lot of snow yet. They had that crazy windstorm a couple of days ago, but it seems to be pretty decent weather otherwise past that point there. And I guess on this side of Tanana. So I think they're going to do okay in terms of weather. I'm sure you would agree with that, Roan?
I mean, I know that the section from Caltag to Anvik, that whole area, well, Caltag to Grayling, is not traveled very often. So that section of trail is known to be not the fastest, I guess, in terms of when a trail gets traveled a lot, what happens is the snow gets packed down, kind of creates a firm base, and so typically teams can travel faster and easier over that. So between Ruby and Galena, Nolato, and Caltech, there's a fair amount of local traffic there. So if you compare the times between Ruby and Caltech to the times between Tanana and Ruby, which is a section that not as many people travel, so those areas where local traffic isn't as frequent throughout the winter mean that the trail is more likely to be slower because it doesn't have an established base. So the trails that are right outside of our house, we've been running on them all year, and so they're just rock hard all the way down. It's essentially a bike path, firm, good packed down snow, so the dogs are just kind of running on top of the snow. And in areas where the trail breaking crew goes out and puts in the trail, maybe a couple passes, a couple snowmobiles, snow machines we call them, but a couple snow machines going down the trail, putting up markers, kind of making a path. Might be a nice trail for a few teams, but as dog teams travel over it, feet start to sink in and kind of churn up the snow, which is not quite as solidified. So the trail can deteriorate over time or just be altogether slow, depending on the snow conditions. So that's what I think one of the reasons why the section between Ruby and Caltech teams have had pretty good travel speeds, because that trail has a lot of local traffic. It also follows the Iron Dog Trail, so that's been run a couple weeks before the start of Iditarod. So kind of putting in a nice path, a nice base in the trail for the dog teams to head through.
And that's a good point, Roan. We've talked about that many times on the podcast over the years about the Iron Doggers going out first. Typically, it's a week or so from about the time that these guys are getting to Ruby this year. So up to the point of Ruby, the Iron Dog guys did not run over the trail because of the change in the race course. But now, once they do get past there, all of the teams are back on that Iron Dog Trail and will follow that, except for this loop that they're doing. I don't think that they did that section, did they, Roan? They went the original route.
That's a section that has probably not had much traffic on it all winter. So that's generally why the southern route has a reputation for having a more challenging trail, because it doesn't follow as much of the Iron Dog route.
Right.
So the sections between Caltag all the way to Iditarod to Ophir, essentially, Ophir to Caltag, on a southern route year, a typical southern route year, haven't had that much traffic up to that point in the winter. So it might be just a handful of trail breaking runs with the Iditarod trail breakers putting up markers, and meaning that the trail can be slow, but that's not always the case. Some years you have optimal conditions where even just one pass snow machine breaking trail can set up a really nice trail, but typically what happens is it kind of requires a little bit more traffic to make a really nice packed down firm trail for the dogs to run the easiest down.
There you go, guys. Expert analysis for sure. So let's jump into our first story of the evening. Last night we reported that Brenda Mackey scratched in Galena, or was it Tanana? Tanana. She scratched in Tanana. She had an incident with one of her dogs. The dog name was Jet. She was cruising on her way to Galena, and the dog had an issue, so she got her tracker out and thought that she pushed the button, the emergency button. And that is the story that we're going to talk about. She ended up turning around with the dog in the sled bag and headed back the shorter distance to Tanana compared to Galena.
Ruby.
Ruby, I'm sorry, to Ruby, because she wanted to get help for her dog. She thought it was an emergency. So the point being is all of these guys carry these trackers. And of course, we're talking all about these trackers as we discuss the race. And for people that may not know, it is a little orange and black piece of tech about the size of a men's wallet. And it has a couple of different buttons on it. Typically, it's stowed in either a dog booty or something similar to the front of the sled. And what it does is it sends out a signal to the GPS up in the sky, and then they coordinate back just a typical GPS signal. So think of like how your phone does with MapQuest if you're driving down the road and you're trying to find directions to here or there. The key with these is not just the tracking ability that we're following along on this map, but they have the ability to send out a signal for help, an SOS signal, or potentially a message. And this technology has been around a long time. I remember when I first used a spot tracker, probably 15 years ago or so, pretty rudimentary compared to now, and had a very similar system to what they have now. And of course, that technology has developed tremendously over the last few years. A lot of people are very familiar with inReach devices. I have used the larger handheld inReach. I've used the inReach Mini and now the inReach Mini 2. And the technology between the inReach, the big inReach handheld and the inReach Mini are almost uncomparable. And it's just so much different because they're using different technology to locate satellites. Now, why is that important? Because in Brenda's case, she thought that she pushed the button to get help, the emergency help that is required by these devices. Now, the problem is, and of course, we're only speculating here, the problem is it takes this technology a little bit of time to grab these satellites. The newer the technology, the faster that it connects. Like the inReach Mini connects almost immediately, whereas a spot tracker, especially the older ones, take much longer meaning minutes. So if a person gets out of their sled, takes it out of the little bag, presses the button, and then immediately puts it back in the sled or puts it in their pocket or something like that, that signal may not go out, even though the little lights on the spot tracker may be showing the color that shows that it has sent. So especially if you're under stress, if it's poor visibility, there's sort of all different reasons why this would not work. Why are we saying this? Because she thought that she pressed the button and then she thought, hey, this is the right thing to do. I need emergency help for my dog. So I'm going to press this button. Hopefully somebody will help, right? So then she turned around, she gets back to the checkpoint, and at least the story at the time of recording is they told her, we did not get any indication that you pressed the button, but since you pressed it, according to you, you have to scratch, which is the rule for outside assistance. And I'm not sure exactly what that rule number is, but anytime you have outside assistance, meaning you flag down a snow machine that, just your passerby or snow machine, anytime it is of assistance that requires outside help, it is an immediate disqualification. Now, I know there's a couple of different loopholes to that. I know that you're allowed to have assistance from another musher, I believe. For example, if you lose your team, another musher can catch your team and give you a ride to your team and that sort of thing. So that is not considered outside assistance. I can't think of I'm trying to think about what happened with Dallas last year and the Moose. I don't think that there was any cause of outside assistance. But anyway, the point being is this technology is still fickle. And even though you may think that it works correctly, it still takes a bit to work correctly. And I know there are blessings and curses to have any type of technology out there. So, Roan, I am sure that you have been in mushing long enough, at least I think you have in terms of the years, where you ran without trackers and with trackers. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe it was actually my rookie Iditarod in 2008 when they were experimenting trackers, so they gave a handful of teams the spot trackers, and back in that day, they were big. It was like a big plastic Pelican case with some like D-cell batteries. It was pretty big and clunky, and so they gave them to a number of teams just to kind of see what it was like, test the feasibility of the technology. And my dad, being kind of a prankster from time to time, he had one on his sled, and while he was on his 24, he was chatting with one of the Iditarod Air Force pilots who was flying some volunteers up and down the trail. And so he said, "Hey, wouldn't it be funny if we put the tracker in your airplane, and then you see the race organization could see me going like 100 miles an hour up and down the trail all over the place." So he did, and then I guess I think the race personnel or whoever was doing the tracker program afterwards didn't think it was so funny, so they took his tracker and gave it to somebody else. I think they gave it to Dee Dee's team or something like that that year. And then it was a couple years after that it became part of the race. And that was, I think, kind of the start of the Iditarod Insider, because then you could sign up for the Insider, watch the GPS trackers, and really, instead of just looking at the standings and waiting for them to update just a printout spreadsheet of the in and out times of the teams, you could actually watch the teams moving in real time. So it's a really neat way of following the race. And it's pretty common nowadays in all mid distance races. Typically will have the trackers. I think the help button and the SOS button as part of the technology are maybe sized. I don't like my tracker. The ones that they give me on the race, I don't think it has a button. I just assume that it doesn't, because that's, when you're mushing dogs, you should be prepared for, a lot of different, situations where you're kind of your own assistants out there, and the distances are so remote. There's been situations on the Iditarod where people have pressed the help button and nobody's been able to come and get them, and it's taken hours for assistance. So your best bet is, being prepared for anything.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because this technology is often used by other outdoor enthusiasts. And I'm in this space. I have a degree in outdoor leadership and all of that. So I see a lot of research coming out about this. And there are so many stories about people relying on this technology as a crutch. They are going out so unprepared, not necessarily on things like Iditarod, but they'll go on a 50-mile hike, and then they get in trouble of some stretch, and then they say, "Oh, well, no problem. I have this fancy technology. I can just press this button and somebody's going to show up." Now, the key is, along with Iditarod, is when this button is pushed, it's not instantaneous, as Roan just said. It may be a very long time. I remember one time in Iditarod, I believe it was Hugh Neff, he was out on Gullivan Bay. He pressed the button, got in his sled bag, and was there for a long time. I mean, hours upon hours. He was there waiting for help. I guess he got off trail or something. I don't remember exactly, but that is exact reason why these should not be relied on 100%, because just because you have it, it's not necessarily right to hold that as a crutch in order to say, "Hey, the cavalry will come." One other point on that, any of this technology, at least today, is when you do press that button, it goes to like a call center. The inReaches in particular go to a call center in the lower 48. They get that call, and then they disperse resources, whether it be search and rescue or the troopers or the sheriffs or whomever. It's not like, "Hey, I'm going to press this button and my wife Michelle is going to find out instantaneously, and then she's able to get on a snow machine and go get help." So there are...
I want to follow that up just a little bit too. And what people need to understand is, the second you hit the button, it does not require you to hit it a bunch of times more. It's not going to make help come faster. But also, it says right there on their website that it continues to send out your signal for every 5 minutes until it's canceled or the batteries run out. So as Roan was mentioning, and you as well, if you push that button and you're capable of continuing on down the trail, albeit possibly slow, the idea is you should continue on down the trail, whichever direction to the closest checkpoint, so that you can obtain the proper care that you need for either yourself or your dogs.
Yeah, and of course, we have no idea what the deal is on this instance, but I know that over the years, since these came into tradition with races like this and many others, so many people have relied on them where they didn't in all of the years before. So I don't know. I'm sort of in the same batch that Roan is. I think that you should know it's there, but man, you ought to be able to get yourself out of any situation. Of course, there could be life or death situations. I mean, if you fall off your sled and break your femur, that is a much different scenario than if you wander off trail and you get your dog team stuck in a snowbank. That is an entirely different deal. So,
but you also don't rely on one piece of technology either.
Nope. You should always have redundancies. That's kind of the mantra of outdoor travel. But anyway, it's a very interesting topic, not only in mushing, but in outdoor activities around. You know, go ahead, Roan.
Yeah, so I pulled up the race rules because I was curious about electronic devices. They have a section about how you can carry an emergency locator, spot, or any kind of satellite tracking, but it says activation of any emergency, including accidental, may make a musher ineligible to continue and may result in an automatic withdrawal from the race. So that's saying that if you press that, the rule about electronic devices is saying if you press the SOS button or the help button, any of the those like response buttons on the satellite tracker, you're going to be withdrawn from the race automatically. So I guess that's the tricky part about the story with Brenda is she says she pressed the button and she told race officials she pressed the button. So they said, hey, well, we never received the signal, but because you told us you pressed it, you're out of the race. And she says, yeah, I pressed it because I was worried about my dog and I thought it was an emergent situation. So I figured it was the best way to get help. I'm trying to help the dog. Then I realized well, I better just start getting to the closest place because if somebody's coming for help, they'll be that much closer. The other rule about electronic devices, though, is it does allow mushers to carry any two-way communication. So that's phones, satellite phones, in Garmin InReach satellite messengers, which are pretty common nowadays. And I think in her kind of recap of what happened, she says, I don't carry an InReach, and that's something that maybe it could be a point of talking about is if she had an InReach, she could message one of the race officials and say, hey, I've got this dog that I think needs help, because then it kind of opens up, maybe the race marshal could have gotten a vet, to message her, try this or try that, whether or not that's outside assistance, because now you're satellite messaging with veterinarians in the race, and getting assistance about the care of your dogs while you're out on the trail. That kind of blurs the line of that rule to some degree, but she wasn't carrying a satellite messenger, so that's not what happened. But I think if for next year when I'm running Iditarod, I'm going to have the race marshal's phone number in my InReach, so that if I have an issue, instead of pressing the spot tracker, I might say, hey, call Warren and say, hey, I've got this thing going on. It's not a pressing the emergency button, but maybe it allows for whether it becomes outside assistance, that's one thing. But if you say, hey, I have this emergent situation with one of my dogs, it can probably result in a more rapid response from the races, because you get a little bit more detail rather than just, hey, this button was pressed, the signal went off, we don't know what happened. In this case, that never even happened, so it's kind of a moot point.
Yeah,
but I think that's not just a mute point, though. I think that might be a talking point in the future, like the near future, because I think exactly what you said might need to be interwoven into the rules somehow with how much we are under the scope. I think that the availability of us to talk to an official in the race, that then we can say, hey, what do you guys want me to do? I'm concerned about my dog. I want to do some preventative care immediately. Are we able to make this happen? And that judgment call being made by a race marshal or official of some sort and getting to a vet, maybe that doesn't mean that the racer is disqualified or is forced to scratch, but maybe it opens us up to better optics through the guise of better veterinarian care.
Yeah, very interesting topic for sure. And one last point on that. I am kind of a gear nerd. I have a lot of gear that we review and use for various reasons. And almost on every piece of gear that I'm familiar with, whether it be spot trackers or inReaches or any of those types, almost all of them have sort of a foolproof way of pressing that button. Either you have to lift up a little lever or press it this one way or the other. All of them are almost all designed where they cannot be mistakenly pressed. It has to be a deliberate effort to do that. So long discussion on that, and I'm sure we will hear much more about this in the coming days. So that is our take on trackers and pressing the button. We almost cover that every year. So let's jump into, before we do our next story, which is very interesting, I want to do a quick question from a listener. His name is Ian, listening in from the UK. And we talked a little bit about this the other day, but his question is, how have things changed, leaders changed, in average finishing times from the 1990s at about 15 to 17 days, now to sub 10 days? And the question is it breeding? Is it tech? Is it equipment? Is it the musher? Is it the trail? Or what? This is from Ian in the UK. I'll have Roan go first, and then I'll jump in with my thoughts as well.
I think the like finishing times, getting closer to, from going back to the 90s, 10 to 15 to 12 days, and then now essentially if you look 95 onward, it's all been sub 9. 9 days and some hours. So from 1995, I don't think the race has been won in over 9 days. So it's in that 8.5 to 9 day range, or 9.5 day range. So from that, there's a variety of factors that have caused the race to become faster. One of them being that the dogs are better. The dogs are just better bred for this specific type of job in terms of running long distance, over the course of 10 days or so. So the dogs have just gotten better at being long distance runners, but then the training has improved as well. So the understanding of how to prepare a team to cover this kind of distance, and the miles that you put on, and how many miles and where and when in the season, and kind of the type of training that you do has improved. Nutrition has improved, equipment has improved. So it's a variety of factors. I wouldn't necessarily attribute much to the trail improving as a whole, but from one year to the next, the overall field will finish faster, or the overall field will finish slower, and that would be attributed to a faster or slower trail in terms of weather. Deep, soft snow leads to slower travel times. Hard, fast trail leads to less resistance on the sled, so faster travel times, easier running for the dogs. So the years where the whole field finishes in 8 days and some hours means that it was typically a lot of stretches along the trail, a pretty firm and easy running trail. And then the years where the whole field kind of finishes slower tends to be a more kind of slow trail year. So the trail, I wouldn't say has changed. There have been improvements in certain sections of the trail. Mostly, I think for the mushers' comfort, just avoiding sleds crashing into trees and things like that. Just kind of certain sections have been smoothed out, but it's still the distance is still the same. So I wouldn't say that that's caused it, but yeah, better dogs, better training, better nutrition, better equipment. It's kind of a combination of factors.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add to that. I would agree with all that you said. I would like to point out to Ian and anybody else, there is a very cool series on Netflix about NASCAR. And it sort of gives you a behind the scenes look about how the cars have gotten much better, how like the the Daytona 500 has gotten faster, and things are much different now than they were just even a couple of decades ago. And the reason I bring this up is he said, and this is a little bit different than dog mushing, of course, is he says that all of our cars are exactly the same. It's how we do all of the stuff to lead up to the race, sort of the training, if you will, and how we are able to navigate this same technology to get us to do what we wanted to do. So if you think about that in a musher's perspective, if most of the people have pretty much the same equipment, there are of course different breeds of dogs and that sort of thing, but by and large, there's not a huge variance compared to back in the day. I mean, back in the day, there were a lot more Siberian teams and a lot more village dog teams and all that. But like Rowan said, these guys nowadays, they're bred specifically to do this race, specifically, and I'm sure Rowan would probably agree with this, specifically for races like the Iditarod. So a dog team that does very well in a shorter mid-distance race, say like the Connect 200, that is just blazing a trail there, is probably a much different dog that is going to do very well on a race like the Iditarod. Am I speaking out of turn there at all on that, Roan?
I'm not sure, because I think it might not necessarily be the type of dog one way or another. There's plenty of teams over the years that have dominated the mid-distance circuit and then won Iditarod or done really well in Iditarod. There's a number of like Jeff King, Martin Boozer, Doug Swing. Well, I think Mitch. When he used to do the mid distance races, all those guys who won multiple Iditarods, they were also doing really really well in the mid distance races as well. So I think it just goes back to maybe the dogs themselves that certain individuals had that were able to win repeatedly had faster average cruising speeds. But nowadays it does seem like there is a bit more of a distinction between mid distance and long distance, because the mid distance races I think have gotten substantially faster, and the Iditarod has kind of remained the same. And if you think about at some point with running a long distance race faster and faster, you're going to hit diminishing returns in terms of how fast can you go before a marathon pace becomes a sprint.
Yep.
And mid distance is blurring the line. I mean, there's 100, 200 mile races where the teams are going 12 to 14 miles an hour for that entire distance, which is pretty incredible, and it's amazing to see. But then, I mean, maybe we're just not there yet with covering that kind of covering the distance of Iditarod with that kind of speed. Maybe that's not the way that you can cover 1,000 miles. So that remains to be seen. And over the years, people have had different philosophies on that. In general, the race has gotten faster over time, but it's kind of plateaued to some degree, where the dogs are still pulling the sleds, so they're not just running freely, pulling nothing. So they have to pull, and then if you look at the times in over the years, it's kind of seems to be like that eight and some hours. It's pretty hard to push past, and to really have a record-setting race, you have to have the weather cooperate with you quite a bit in this modern era. So if you think of horse racing, which has been going on for a really long time, probably more of a it's a much larger industry. There hasn't been another secretariat and people have been breeding for the best racehorse in the world for generations. So at some point with any kind of animal, you're still constrained by the biology of that animal. So how much faster can the sled dogs get?
Yeah, and just one other piece to that before I give a quick stat. You talked about that 8-day threshold, and remember, in that 8 days, there's still a day and a half of mandatory rest that you have to put in. So that takes it down to, without any other rest at all, that takes it down to 6.5 days of solid running without any other rest is where we're at now, with that 8-day and hours mixed in there. So one quick stat that I found today, the smallest range between first and last happened in 2021, and that was 2 days, 18 hours, 15 minutes, and some seconds. That was Dallas CV winning and Victoria Hardwick as the Red Lantern. So we talk a lot about on this show about the fastest team and the slowest team, and are the slowest teams going to make it there before the banquet? And we'll talk a little bit about that in our later coverage. But I found that be quite interesting between the last two teams. So let's mush over to our next story. This is going to be interesting to talk about because Roan has intimate knowledge with this. And the question comes up every year is, can you explain the difference between a kennel that runs a competitive team, a puppy team, and a B team? And I'm sure different kennels have different definitions of that, but I know that you were a part of this scenario in 2012, I believe, if I did not get my year wrong, where you guys were doing just this. You had a puppy team and a competitive team and a B team and all of that. Can you briefly, Roan, break that down? What does that mean to give a definition for our listeners? What does that mean for those three mushers?
Yeah, so the idea behind having a competitive team, maybe a B team and a puppy team is mainly for kennels that are running Iditarod every year. So typically the larger Iditarod kennels, the ones with a little bit more resource in terms of just predictably signing up one year to the next, and the idea is that one of the things that makes a dog really good at running Iditarod is having that experience, is having traveled the trail, kind of seen the checkpoints, got in the routine of traveling, resting, and traveling and resting, and just running really long distances and going across the state of Alaska. So a number of kennels, probably starting, I would say, in the 90s, but I don't quote me on that, realized, hey, we can have a racing team, so we'll have the A team, the best, most experienced, top group of dogs from the kennel running with the musher, so whoever that was, and then to maybe focus not only on that year but also on the next year. We're going to also run a second team so that those dogs get experience traveling the trail. So that's where kind of the A and the B team come from, is kennels that are able to field multiple teams in the same race. So that's A team and B team. And then the idea of a puppy team is to get a group of younger dogs, and the term puppy is a relative term. Typically, from my experience, it was dogs that were about a year and a half, a year and 3/4 old. So dogs that were born the previous spring or summertime. So their first year, they hadn't gotten they weren't fully grown enough to run in Iditarod, but then the next season they started full training at just over a year old, and made it through the full Iditarod training and travel down the trail at a more relaxed pace than the racing team. So typically puppy teams will travel with the goal of finishing, gaining experience, and making sure that it's a kind of smooth, easy run for the dogs, or relatively easy run for the dogs, compared to the competitive teams, which would do slightly longer runs, slightly less rest, so kind of save the more challenging running for the more experienced and more mature dogs. So kind of the distinction between an A team and a B team, or an A team and a puppy team, which the term puppy team could mean it's entirely composed of puppies that have never run the Iditarod, or it could be mostly puppies and then some kind of B team dogs from the kennel, depending on which kennel is running that kind of a team.
And in that scenario, Roan, in your time with working with, and it was in 2012, it was Matt Failer, you, and your dad, right?
Yes.
So in that,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
So that year, it was a year that we had actually kind of enough dogs from the kennel with a decent amount of experience to put together 2 competitive teams, and then Matt Failer was running a pretty much dedicated puppy team. So the last couple of seasons he was working at the kennel, basically running a team of dogs in Iditarod that he helped raise from puppies. So the kind of rotation that my dad had at his kennel was he had 1 first-year handler and 1 second-year handler, and typically the first-year handler would do their qualifying races their first season, and then run Iditarod a group of puppies that they helped, they saw born, they kind of helped do the initial training with, and helped raise and travel down the trail with them as their puppy group. So and that was a benefit to the handlers. It gives them a reward for scooping copious amounts of dog poop, and putting in the effort, putting in the training miles of helping train a team or multiple teams for a kennel, and then getting the the benefit of running Iditarod with a group of dogs like that. So that's so yeah, that year Matt Failer had a puppy team and was doing well with them. So his goal was fast travel time. So between checkpoints, he wanted to go fast and have a nice, smooth, easy runs, and then rest for a long time to help keep the speed up, help make it really easy for the dog. So that was kind of the goal. And yeah, that was the role of the puppy team in that year's race. And then we also had a group of dogs who had a number of Iditarod finishes and quite a bit of experience in other races. So that year at the kennel, we kind of did a draft as we got closer to Iditarod time, kind of put together a team of, I like this dog, so I'm going to take this dog, and then you like this dog, so you take this dog, and literally just drafted the kind of 4 race group and put together 2 teams that ended up not being an A team and a B team. We finished side by side, so we really put together 2 evenly paced teams in that particular, which was a fun way of traveling the trail.
I don't know if you know this, Roan, but is there any occasion in all of your time that you've been watching Iditarod where one of these B team or puppy team performed better than the competitive team? Say, for example, you in that scenario that you designed, has the ultra competitive team been passed and sort of put in the dust, if you will, the better team? Has that ever occurred that you know of?
Yeah, in fact, 2001 was one of the years where my dad's puppy team, who was being run by a guy named Andy Motoro, finished ahead of my dad's racing team. So Andy Motoro finished 17th place, and Martin Boozer finished 24th place. So that was quite a bit of a difference for the puppy team, and he was a rookie that year too. That was just the race team didn't have the best year that year. Puppy team had a really good year, and it could be just the races that were run, but it could also be the level of talent in that group of dogs, because then the next year in 2002 my dad's team won the race and won it almost from the start of the race. They got the first to McGrath, halfway point, first to the Yukon, I think first to the coast. I think that was one of the years where there was just a breakaway, and the front team just swept the pack, which has happened a handful of times.
Very interesting for sure. Lots of good stats there, I guess is the appropriate word for sure. So we are running late tonight, and I know we still have our musher profile of the evening. Michelle, who do you have?
I have Dane Baker. Dane works for Alaskan Husky Adventures with Matthew and Liz Failer. Baker thought he should do something different before heading off to college after he graduated high school in 2018, and he wound up in Alaska and calls it home. I guess college will wait, as he is still on that gap year, as he so lovingly referred to in his bio, taking in all that Alaska has to offer and everything that a dog team will teach you. Dane is running the puppy team at this moment and is resting in Galena when I wrote this up, along with Failer's team, but Matt Failer seems to have already been on the move. Dane is very active on Instagram and Facebook, and Dane trains on the same trails that we do.
Yeah, I ended up meeting Dane at the ceremonial start this past Saturday. Very interesting guy. Looking forward to doing an interview with us after the season. I don't know him very well. I do see him from time to time on the trail, but as all of us mushers know, typically we only recognize people by the color of their parka and the dogs in their team. So I never know if it's him or Matt out there on the trail. I know they have another guy or two working there with them, but he seems like a pretty upbeat dude. Looking like he's doing pretty good out there. I don't know if he's going to do what we were just talking about with Roan's dad's team and the guy passing him coming up, but I guess it's potentially possible. But I know that you do know Dane a little bit. Is that right, Roan?
Yep. Yeah, I've hung out with him a handful of times, and seems like a great guy. Just loves talking about dogs, loves working with dogs, and yeah, just a really cheery guy to be around. I know I think he got his start actually working at a sled dog kennel down in the lower 48 somewhere. In Wyoming, I believe, but I'm not sure. That's just something that I haven't chatted with him about it. But yeah, so then he's worked for a couple kennels, and I know he's worked for Matt Failer for a long time. And I just pulled up the tracker, and I'm looking, and he is currently ahead of that kennel's A team or the adult team by 5 miles or so. So that might be just at the moment. Matt Failer has taken his 24, so I'm not sure if Dane has. So on the tracker, the puppy team is ahead of the race team right now, but I doubt that'll be the case by the time the race is over.
A lot of racing still to go. We're not even have the group past the halfway point yet. I know some of those guys are very close as they get to Caltag and then doing the loop and then back up and then on their way on that last third of the race. So it's panning out to be pretty interesting in terms of what's happening. We have only had 3 scratches so far, which is kind of typical at this point in the race. Of course, this is different than everything. And we have an extra 100 and some odd miles that we are taking to effect that we have not talked about in years past. So it's the longest Iditarod to date. So we'll see where things shake out.
On that, Robert, we do have a question.
Oh, from our
Joy
yes.
at Sheba Education Center, and she asks just that. How many miles will the Mushers run on this race?
I don't know exactly what it is. Roan, can you pull that up for me and tell me exactly what the mileage is? But this is the longest race. What is the mileage?
The mileage that they have listed on the tracker is 1,128.
1,128. Each year it fluctuates just a little bit. They have it on the Burled Arch and sort of as the statistics of Iditarod as 1,049, which is an interesting little piece of trivia. They wanted to have that 49 on there for the 49th state. Alaska is the 49th state in the country, so they have that there. But each year it changes a little bit. The northern route and the southern route each have their own mileage, and then they had this Fairbanks route, which was run 4 times now, so they had a little bit different mileage there. And then they had a Gold Loop run a few years ago, which I believe was the shortest race of the race's history. So it changes each year, but this year by far is the longest miles for sure. So let's finish up, guys. Roan, do you have anything else you want to mention before we close? And then we'll finish up with what's happening on tomorrow's show. Go for it.
Yeah, as far as the front couple teams, Paige Drobny is at mile 443. Cal is 456. So that's 13 miles from Caltag right now. Her tracker's showing her moving at 10 miles an hour. So she's flying down the trail. Must be a nice trail. And I think if I'm just doing the time math in my head while I'm talking properly, I think she's going to get to Caltag and then rest. Jesse Holmes is probably going to get off of his 24 and have a lead on her leaving Caltag, would be my guess. But that's just off the cuff. So I think leaving Caltag, Jesse Holmes will be the first one out, followed by Paige Drobny, and then Matt Hall will be likely third, unless Matt Hall chooses to do something else like continue past Caltag, splitting the run to Eagle Island up into a different kind of distance. So might be something that he's accustomed to doing. I know he does a lot of camping with his training runs, so I think he likes camping outside of checkpoints where it's nice and quiet, but maybe he's wanting to stop in Caltag to get off of the river for a few hours, because the villages are off of the river ever so slightly before hopping back on the river. So, maybe teams are starting to get sick of camping on the river. Still a lot of river miles to go. I think the top 3 will be Jesse Holmes, Paige Drobny, and Matt Hall in that order. But we'll see what happens tonight.
And Michelle, do you have anything to add before we close?
I don't. I just wish everyone a great evening and fast trails.
There you go, guys. So tomorrow on the show, quite a few teams will have finished that 24-hour rest. We had a great discussion last night about what happens on the 24. We have a few questions that are based off of that I hope to get to tomorrow. And I think that once everybody's done, we'll have a very clear picture about where things stand. There's always a little bit of speculation until all that shakes out, but I think in the next day or so, we will be in a much better position to talk about that. And then I guess we need to start talking about what happens after that 24-hour rest as they head up northwest, I guess it is, from Caltag up to Unalakleet and all of that. So,
Robert, can I add a little bonus tip?
Yep.
Ramey Smith and Brian Mills are in Nome, and they are starting to put the arch together, and maybe we should touch on that a little bit tomorrow as well.
Yeah, they were. I saw that news report this afternoon as everybody's up there and making sure that is going to happen. So that's going to be a cool thing because it is the third Burled arch in its history. It seems like they're lasting about 25 years. So I guess in the next quarter decade or so, unless they really change up things, this one will last quite a while. So with that, on behalf of my my co-hosts today, Roan and Michelle, we'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.
Are you a fan of the great outdoors? Do you enjoy the thrill of speed and adventure? Then listen up. Introducing Mushing, your ultimate guide to the exciting world of dog-powered sports and mushing. Whether you're a seasoned musher or just starting out, Mushing has got you covered. Get ready to immerse yourself in captivating stories of incredible sled dog races, expert training tips from seasoned professionals, and gear reviews to help you make the right choices for your team. From the breathtaking landscapes of Alaska to the snowy trails of Scandinavia, Mushing takes you on a thrilling journey through the world of dog-powered sports. Don't miss out on the latest issue, packed with exclusive interviews with top mushers, in-depth articles on sled dog nutrition, and stunning photography that will transport you to the heart of the action. So whether you're dreaming of competing in the Iditarod or simply want to learn more about this incredible sport, Mushing is your go-to resource. Subscribe now and get ready to unleash your passion for mushing. Visit our website at mushing.com. Find us on your favorite podcast platform. Mushing, where the spirit of adventure meets the power of the pack.